So what did you do in the military? I know that's the basis of kind of like why you do what you do, but what did you do there?
I joined the Army. I went to basic training and my AIT, my advanced individual training in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. I became my advanced individual training is for 88 Mike, which is a military transport specialist, which I say all the time. It's just a fancy way of saying it. That I was a truck driver. After that, I went to Korea I was at Camp Humphreys in Pyeongtaek, Korea for about a year and a half, and then I got out. I took my military driver's license, my CDL license, showed it to the DMV. I don't know if you can still do this or not, but showed that to them at the DMV, and they just gave me a CDL license with all the endorsements on it: tanker, hazmat, triples, doubles, everything.
Wow.
And then I got a job as a truck driver and did that with the Winn-Dixie grocery store, Winn-Dixie, and did that for about 25 years and recently retired a few years ago.
So you were doing this stuff before you were done driving then?
Yeah, I started this back in 2011. I started my YouTube channel back in 2011. I did that. I did the whole civil rights investigations or auditing, however you want to call it, as I was working a full-time job for quite a while. And then when I retired from my job as a truck driver at Dixie, which eventually became CNS Wholesale, I just started doing the YouTube civil rights investigations thing full time.
Were you? Yeah, it's interesting. My grandfather retired from the military, and back then he wanted to go into law enforcement, but his experience was that I think he graduated or he retired from the military in 1970, and he always told me that when he went to look for law enforcement jobs, they always said that they were paying like $18,000 a year. And he said they were like, well, with your pension, you can have a nice living. And he's like, but I've already earned that. I want something that pays me a living wage now. So he started driving trucks, and he worked for, there used to here in Tennessee called Morrison's Cafe, and that ultimately was bought by Sara Lee. So he sort of did the same thing.
Wow.
He drove for them and retired and had a nice life. I mean, retired a millionaire because of it. But
well, if that little piece of plastic, that little piece, I'm doing the ID thing like the cops do. That little piece of plastic with the CDL endorsement on it is a lot of people's ticket to a successful life. You can support yourself and your family in it. That's what I did. I supported myself and my family on being a truck driver, and all I had was a GED education, and I was making as much money as.
You can make a lot more money in the blue collar fields, especially now. But for sure, back then, you can make a lot more money doing something like that. And that I would imagine that was one of the best things you could possibly do coming out of the military with that sort of work. So you were in a transportation unit. Is that why you had a CDL?
Well, that's just what I kind of qualified for with the ASVAB test. I didn't do, I wasn't like an officer candidate or anything like that. So I had the choice of either being a cook or a truck driver, and I didn't want to be a cook, so I became a truck driver. And the good thing about that was, of course, I wasn't thinking that at the time because I was stupid and young. But I didn't learn how to blow things up or doing something that couldn't translate into the civilian world. Being a truck driver obviously did translate into the civilian world, and I was very blessed that worked out the way it did, and I was able to translate that into a civilian job.
Yeah. That's pretty interesting. So was it truck driving that sort of led you to the understanding that somebody needed to stand in the gap and do this sort of stuff? Like how did you arrive at, Jeff Gray, the person who drove a truck for a living, to Jeff Gray, the person that stands on the side of the public sidewalk and holds up a sign and gets himself arrested for the common good?
Well, the being a truck driver thing is just because that's kind of what I pigeonholed myself into. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being a truck driver. It's a great profession. But, I wanted to be a helicopter pilot when I grew up. I wanted to drive helicopters instead of trucks. But I wasn't dedicated to that. I wasn't focused on that. And I wanted to be a truck driver. My dad was a truck driver. So I always thought it was a cool thing to do. And I became a truck driver. But what got me started with the YouTube thing at all was just kind of organically coming together at the time. YouTube was starting up back in, 2010, 2008 or so, and being a truck driver with Winn-Dixie here out of Jacksonville, warehouses in Jacksonville, we went down, drove up and down Highway 301 a lot. And on Highway 301 is an older, it's not an interstate, it's an older highway that runs through the central part of Florida. And there's some towns there. There's the town of Lottie, Florida, the town of Hampton, Florida, and the town of Waldo, Florida, are all these very notorious speed traps that the AAA actually would put billboards up. They paid for billboards for decades that they had on the north end and the south ends of these towns on the highways you're coming up into the towns, warning motorists that they were speed traps. And over the years driving through there, I'm just like, this isn't what these cops are doing in these towns are not for promoting public safety. This is just got to be about revenue, because I would literally see, like in the town of Lottie, Florida, the city cops would have somebody pulled over for speed enforcement and searching their car. And there's usually some young kids like that were on their way to Gainesville or something like that, searching their car, doing all that stuff, while the county was actually responding to an accident in the city limits of Lottie. And they couldn't be dragged away from doing their speed trap to go help an accident. They had to bring the county in. YouTube was coming about at the time. I was watching videos like Checkpoint USA and the Ridley Report and the Free Keene movement. These are all old stuff that started back around 2010 or so. And that stuff inspired me. I was like, wow, I didn't know that you could assert your rights like that. I didn't know that you could stand your ground, and I didn't know that you could film the police and it was your right to do so. I didn't know that you didn't have to give up your ID if you're not suspected of a crime. And I didn't know you could say no to a search and things like that. So the first thing I wanted to do was just go out, and I actually, at the time, I didn't even have a digital camera. I had an old VHS cassette camera, like a Sony, the little flip out thing, and it had a little mini,
like mini DV.
Yeah. And I went out with that. And the first time I pointed my camera at the cops in Lottie, what I was going to do is just put a video on YouTube and show people where the cops hid, what the speed limit through the town was. And I was just hoping that maybe if just one person could see this video, it'll stop them from getting a ticket, and it'll slow people down through the town, right? It'd be double-edged sword, promote safety in the town of Lottie and keep people from getting speeding tickets and getting their money taken from them, their hard-earned money. So anyway, first time I did that, I'm out there with my VHS cassette camcorder, pointing it at the cop as he's sitting under this tree in front of the elementary school in Lottie. And next thing I know, I'm surrounded by like every cop that's on duty. I think the mayor was out there, the chief of police was out there. He snatched my camera from me and threatened me with arrest, detained me on the side of the road for like 45 minutes until it started to rain, and then they let me go. And a lot of people, that would have the effect of saying, well, screw this, I'm never going to do this again, this is too scary. But with me, it had the opposite effect. I was like, oh hell no, this lit a fire in me, and the rest is history.
So is that something you've always sort of had as a personality trait, is sort of you're not going to push me around, as your response to any sort of like bullying or intimidation tactic like that?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I think you either have that or you don't. Sometimes you can be forced, you can take so much that you end up being that person. I think that's sometimes how some of us have that as a confrontation. That's why I became a lawyer. It satisfies my need for confrontation, but I'm much less confrontational now. But I recognize that as a personality trait you either have or you don't have, is sort of like the ability. It's just fight or flight. You're either going to stand or you're going to go.
Yeah. With the exception of my wife, it's usually fight. So they're just be agreeable.
There are some learned behaviors. At least there was one person on earth who could deter you from making future mistakes.
Most definitely.
So did you end up receiving any sort of citation or anything from that encounter? Or?
No, they just, Officer Starling, they forced me to give up my ID under threat of arrest. They were threatening to arrest me. And I was actually on my way to work when I did that day, which was, I guess, kind of a poor decision. I was like on my way to work and I wound up being late. Didn't want to go to jail. I gave up my ID. He took my camera. They detained me on the side of the road for a while. They finally, when it started raining, they just they didn't want to be out in the rain is what it was. And they just finally just let me go. And he had deleted the video off my camera. They had actually gone in there and, he didn't delete it, but what he did is he rewound it to where the interaction started and started recording again. And I didn't realize it. That's what I think he did anyway. So yeah, no tickets or no arrests or anything like that. But that's just kind of what started it all.
Were you able to record or upload the video to YouTube?
No, I've never uploaded that. And I've lost it since then. I don't know.
Oh man.
I didn't know how to get it off of the cassette. And
it's funny that you decided you were going to do this and you didn't know how you were going to then translate it on YouTube.
Right. I didn't know how I was even going to follow through. I don't even know if I had even created my YouTube channel at that point. As a matter of fact.
Yeah.
There's also another video where I went and filmed a checkpoint, this is when I lived actually in the city of St. Augustine, like down on Anastasia Island. They had a checkpoint at that where they routed traffic off of A1A into the alligator farm. And I went down there with my little camcorder, and I was actually assaulted and shoved over some bushes by a St. Johns County Sheriff's deputy, and I fell over the bushes and everything like that. He shoved me. That video's never seen the light of day either because I didn't know how to transfer it to digital or whatever. I don't even know where it's at anymore.
We need to get a hold of the folks from Legacy Box and see if they can sponsor Jeff's channel and teach him how to convert Not a good digital video. So did you end up suing either of those over either of those encounters, or was it just sort of that something that emboldened you to you were going to do something about this? It's a problem.
No, I didn't sue over any of those encounters. I just it just encouraged me and emboldened me to say, well, there's obviously a problem here.
Yeah, you're 2 for 2 in issuing minor challenges and
Right,
getting
right.
assaulted or getting your hands or getting somebody put their hands on you over it.
In that situation in St. Johns County, in St. Augustine, it was the St. Johns County Sheriff's Department and the local agencies, St. Augustine Beach Police and the city of St. Augustine Police, but it was the Sheriff's Department. The guy that was in charge of the checkpoint saw me filming. They actually came up to me and said, well, what are you doing? And I explained it to him. They said, okay, well, that's fine as long as you stay out of the way. And I asked myself, where would you recommend that I stand? I'll stand there. If you want me to stand in a certain spot, I'll stand there. He said, come stand over here in this little island so that you're out of the way. There's like a landscaped island with bushes and stuff like that. I went and stood where he actually told me to, and that's when another St. Johns County sheriff's deputy saw me filming, and he came up and, what are you doing? And when I turned to talk to him, I was turning the camera at the same time, and he grabbed my arm and he shoved me like that, and I fell over the bushes and dropped my camera. And that's
Wow.
when the original supervisor came around and was like, oh, he's okay, he's okay. That would have been a great video to put out, but
Well, it's out there somewhere. If anybody knows where Jeff's video camera is, we'd like to get this. We'd like to get this video to go viral for nothing more than to just see you tumbling down the hill trying to save your footage. So what would you timestamp that period as? Where would that have been?
the checkpoint was actually in 2008. That was before Lottie, so I got that
Okay.
kind of mixed up. And then the one in Lottie was around 2010, like late 2010. And I think I created my YouTube channel in January 7th of 2011, like the day before my birthday. I didn't realize I was doing that at the time, but that's just kind of the way it worked out.
Yeah. Do you think that looking back, I think I know your answer, but looking back, do you feel like you knew what you needed to know about doing this before you went out there and threw yourself in the middle of it?
Nope. No. I was very blessed that I didn't get hemmed up on anything. I don't think it would have been anything that I would have done, but the way it was back then, it was still cops were arresting people every time they pointed a camera at them, charging them with, obstruction or resisting arrest. That's the contempt of cop charge is what I call it in Florida, is resisting arrest without violence. That's how do you get arrested for resisting arrest when there's no underlying crime? But they do it all the time here in Florida.
Yeah.
I've been charged with that about 7 times, and every time they all get dropped.